In 1912, Willa Bruce bought that first parcel of land right on the sand in what is today the city of Manhattan Beach, and she has an idea to start a business. You'd come out to the beach, you'd rent a bathing suit from Willa Bruce, you'd go down and spend the day at the water and in the sand. You'd come back, you'd buy a sandwich and a fish cake, and you can get a soda pop, and you'd be on your way. A few years later, she was able to buy a second parcel of land, and with those two parcels, erected a two-story brick building. The ground floor was changing rooms, and upstairs was a parlor and a dining room, and you would come for dinner, and there was dancing, picnics, and parties, and that's the resort that became known as Bruce's Beach. Now, of course, not everyone was excited about the success of the Bruce's business, and over about a decade, the Bruces and their patrons endured a campaign of intimidation and harassment and violence. And what you saw was, in light of all of this, the resort just became more popular. And Black people kept coming, and they kept, spending their weekends there. And the resort became so popular that other Black families would not only come to visit, but they actually ended up buying land, and they ended up building homes to be near Bruce's Beach. The city, they tried to buy the Bruces out, and eventually, in the early 1920s, a local real estate agent hatched a scheme to have the city take the property via a racially motivated eminent domain action. What the city said was, we need this land to build a public park. And as far as the eye can see, it's just vacant land. The city says, no, we need to put the park right here, exactly where Bruce's Beach Resort is. So the Bruces, they fought it, but ultimately the Bruces lost, and they lost their property to the city of Manhattan Beach in the eminent domain case. So the building was immediately demolished. Charles and Willa, likely died in poverty. They're buried far, far away from Manhattan Beach. And to this day, 100 years later, no park was ever built on the land that the city of Manhattan Beach took from the Bruces. And in the aftermath of Mr. Floyd's murder, June 19th, 2020, Kavon Ward had this idea to have a protest in the park in Manhattan Beach. And she went to social media and she used hashtag Justice for Bruce's Beach. One of the people who learned about this protest was Los Angeles County Supervisor Janice Hahn. Kenneth Hahn, her dad, was a huge civil rights proponent, served on the board of LA County Supervisors for 30 years. The story goes that Janice Hahn heard about this protest at the park, hashtag Justice for Bruce's Beach, and then she asked her staff, she said, well, who owns that property now? And her staff looked at her and they said, Supervisor, you do. That land is owned by Los Angeles County. You own that property. And what Janice Hahn said was, well, if we own it, we ought to see if there's a way that we can give it back. I've grown up my entire life in Southern California. This happened, 15 miles away, and it was a story that I had never heard. It became very clear to me that this was something that I had to be involved with. One day I'm sitting at my office, and my phone rings, and I see the name that flashes up, and it's a member of the Bruce family. I answer the phone. I said, I feel like I've been preparing my entire personal life and training my entire professional career to be of service to your family in helping you reclaim this land. We were gonna have to pass legislation. We're gonna need the California State Assembly to pass a bill, and it's gonna have to be signed by the governor. This is something I had never done before. I would be working with the team, we'd be in the conference room or on the phone, thinking about what could go wrong, and we would draft language and we'd email it. And 2 days later, we'd be watching the hearings in the State Assembly, and somebody would stand up and they would say, I'd like to introduce an amendment to the bill, and they would read the email that we sent. It was also important for me to understand the ripple effect of the loss of the Bruce property in the 1920s. These were folks that were working class, that had blue-collar jobs, that served in our country's military, that never had the opportunity to be the beneficiaries of the intergenerational wealth that should have been created by the business that their ancestors had started. After we got the land back, people would say, how does it feel to get justice for the Bruces? And I hate when people would say that, because we did not, I want to be clear, we did not get justice. And to them, it was about the life that their family could have had and the life that maybe their family should have had, but They weren't embittered by that. What they wanted to know and understand was, how would this impact the county, and how would the county feel about this? And they were very cognizant of making sure that they were being good partners. Again, this was not a lawsuit that we went out and filed to sue the government to get land back. This was Janice Hahn and Holly Mitchell and the County Board of Supervisors wanting to do the right thing, wanting to engage in restorative justice. You know, this is a family who was robbed of their birthright. I think if you ask folks about that, hey, why don't black people live in Manhattan Beach? You know, people say things like, well, you know, it's really expensive to live there, and black people aren't, you know, don't have the money, or maybe they'll say things like, well, you know, black people really don't like living by the ocean. The truth is, you can draw a straight line from that 1920s eminent domain case to the fact that 100 years later, it's got the smallest population of African-American residents. It reminds you of what happened in Tulsa with Black Wall Street. When you look at the eminent domain map, you had a lot of different families who bought land, but the only people who could afford to build homes on the land they bought were the black families. And I think it's that fact, as much as anything else, that drove the white neighbors absolutely crazy. That black families in the late 19-teens and the early 1920s were more affluent than the white families there.